Good afternoon or good morning, year for your English lesson on Monday now. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so if I could ask you to write today's date, which is Monday the 18th of January, and your learning objective is to plan a leadership story. So this week you're going to be planning and writing your story, your leadership story, about another group of animals that encounter an unexpected visitor. Remember last week you've been writing about the ants. This week you can choose to innovate your own story, or if you're feeling a little bit maybe less confident, you can use the animation about the crabs and the seagull to write your story this week. So let's just remind ourselves of our journey. We started off watching this animation, we've done lots of writing, we've been learning about noun phrases, prepositional phrases, and we also did complex sentences, and we've had a go using those. And now we're going today to do some planning, ready for our write by the end of the week, and our editing of our story. So let's just look at our signs of success, what I'm going to be hoping to see in your writing this week. Now, we have looked at noun phrasing, and I'm going to need to see some really good noun phrasing in your work this week. So noun phrases will appear. You're also going to be using those prepositional phrases as well in your writing. You might use them as fronted adverbials sometimes. So look back in your book last week to find those examples that you can borrow and magpie in your writing this week. You're also going to write in complex sentences, and the challenge for some of you will be to start your sentences with a subordinate clause, remembering that important comma that will come after it. You're also going to write maybe sometimes with fronted adverbials, again, remembering that after a fronted adverbial, there's always a comma. But everybody is going to need to remember to keep the basics there. Capital letters in the right place. Remember, capital letters go at the start of a sentence and also for a proper noun. And also there must be correct punctuation at the end of a sentence. Now, you're probably going to want to make your writing come alive at some points, and so you're going to want to make sure that you maybe occasionally drop in a little bit of alliteration, maybe with your noun phrasing. Maybe you'll drop in the odd simile, but not lots. Occasionally, you might want to try some repetition for effect, not mistaken repetition, when you accidentally repeat yourself, but when you've deliberately done some repetition. Remember that if you are going to do that, you perhaps want to do 3 things repeated, so I know that it's definitely repetition. I'm also going to see some really brilliant, precise action words, some really good verbs, and I'm going to maybe see some adverbs occasionally to modify the verb that you use. Now, what are you writing for this week? Well, you're writing to entertain me. Myself and Miss Pears, we're your audience, and we're going to be really entertained by your stories, we hope. Now, you'll notice this last little section here hasn't been filled in, the key vocabulary. So what I'd like us to do now is to look back at our model of excellence and pick out any words you think, I think I'm going to try and use that this week. It could be a noun, it could be an adjective, or maybe it's going to be a really lovely, precise verb. So pause the video now and go through the model of excellence again. Pick out any words that you think, I'm going to definitely try and use that this week. Well done. Now let's just have a quick look. What words would stand out? Which words would we be able to use in any story? Well, probably that lovely noun phrase, clear azure sky, could be used in most stories this week. That will employ lots of stories. You might not be writing about Antarctica, so icy plains won't necessarily work, or imposing ice structures, but the word meandered might do if you've got a character who's slowly moving. Maybe menacingly, a lovely adverb there, maybe that would be a good word to use. Or eerie silence if you want to write something a little bit scarier. Maybe perched. So I've started you off there. Go back and double check if there's any words that you'd like to make sure you use. Make a list of them somewhere so that you know that you're going to use those words in your planning and your writing this week. Okay, now let's start thinking about our story. Okay, now let's just think again about the plot points. Now, last week, if you remember, we wrote 4 paragraphs and our paragraphs followed this structure. The first paragraph introduced a setting and the main characters. The next paragraph introduced this sudden threat that appeared from nowhere. And then the leader animal takes some sort of action or has a really good idea. And then finally, the team follow the leader and the threat is avoided and everything works out okay in the end. Now, when you come to plan your story, you're going to need to plan 4 paragraphs as well. But I don't know who you're going to be writing about. What group of animals are you going to be writing about today? Who's your main character going to be? And who is the threat going to be? Why don't you pause the video now and have a little think about what animal you could be using in your story. Lovely. Okay, now those of you that are perhaps feeling a little bit less confident, perhaps you haven't got so many ideas, you can use the Cunning Crab story today. So that's at the end of the animation. So you might want to watch that animation again. And again, I'll post that link on Dojo so you can watch that animation again. And you can use the crab story to help you write your story, but it will follow exactly the same principle of having 4 paragraphs. But this time you're going to have a calm and organised set of crabs who are going about their duties on a beach. And then suddenly a threat appears. Do you remember who the threat was? It was that seagull, that hungry seagull coming down. And then the leader takes action. Some quick thinking on the leader's part helps the crabs. And if you remember what happens, the crabs, don't they? They get their pincers out and they manage to save the day, don't they, with their pincers? Okay, and that's what you're going to be writing about. Now, what I need you to do and think about today is obviously I need you to think about your plot points. So you should have this sheet. Now, this sheet was posted last week on Dojo, but if you don't have a printer at home, you also could have collected one from school, because they were left there. If you haven't managed to get one, it's not the end of the world. You could use your book, but it's a little bit more tricky. So you're going to plan out your graph now, and I want you to think about each paragraph. What's the intent of your writing going to be? Is it going to be a positive intent moment or a negative intent moment? Now, I imagine our story is going to end well, start well and end well. But the bits in the middle are going to be probably less positive. In fact, this bit here is going to be the less positive. Now, of course, we're doing this because we want it to inform our writing. We want to collect words and use words that are going to really show the different intent. So here's some ideas to maybe help you on your way. Perhaps you're sort of struggling to think of a set of animals to use. So perhaps, for example, you could have an army of caterpillars. Who could they be avoiding? Or a shoal of fish, maybe clownfish. Maybe a flock of chickens or a colony of rabbits. Think about those animals and who their predators might be. Also think about where those animals live. What kind of place would they live in? Pause the video and have a really good think about that now. Okay, well done. Now remember again, if you're feeling less confident, you can use this animation. So don't worry. There is also a helper sheet to help you that will help you with this animation if you need it, and that will be posted on Dojo as well. Okay, now we're ready to do the main part of our learning today. We're going to start thinking through our specific sentences and key vocabulary for each of our 4 paragraphs. Now let's just remind ourselves about these things here. Now, I think probably in each paragraph, I'm going to want to see the following things. I'm going to need to see fronted adverbials and prepositional phrases. And I'm also going to need to see a range of sentences. I'm going to need perhaps to see some compound sentences and simple sentences and complex sentences for most of you as well. And remember, I'd love it to see sentences started with a subordinate clause with a comma after them. Look back in your work from last week and find some good examples of sentences, and maybe you could borrow or magpie those. You also might want to think about some other things as well. So I'm just going to pop onto our writing rainbow. Now remember, you could borrow anything from here that we've done already. You could decide to put a little bit of alliteration in here and there, or repetition, or a simile. Don't go too mad with that though, because remember, we don't want a big tsunami, do we, of description. We want it to be dropped in and make our writing really come alive. So I'd like you to work on that now. I'd like you to decide and plan exactly what is going to happen in each paragraph. And I'd like you to write some key sentences that you are going to include in your paragraph. Remember to do the hard work today, so when you come to write tomorrow and all the other days, you've done the thinking already. Also, plan out your key vocabulary. your key noun phrases, your key verbs that you want to use, any exciting vocabulary that's going to really make your writing come alive. Remember, you're year 4 and I want to hear some really brilliant words in your writing today. Okay, now I'm going to pause now and you're going to work on that. It's going to take a bit of time. We're talking probably 20 minutes or maybe a little bit more to really plan this. Remember, when you have planned it, a good idea would be to tell someone else your story. Perhaps you could Zoom one of your friends and you can chat about it, or perhaps you can tell your grown-up about what you're planning to write this week. Also, remember to check it through, read it, pop your fingers in your ears and read back what you've written so you can check it makes sense. Okay, I can't wait to find out about your innovative stories later on, and I'm going to be chatting to you about it this afternoon in our Zoom, and I'm going to be really looking forward to see those wonderful sentences and vocabulary that you're going to use. Okay, well done, Year 4.